For all. Roll call, please. Here.
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 All right, we have no special presentations, and so we'll move to public comment. Anyone wanting to speak on something that is not on the agenda, please come on up and speak.
Just before we start, we don't have an agenda sheet out here, so we don't know what's on the agenda. But anyway, I'll just start. I'm Rachel Streeter, 96067, and I have two things. I don't know if you have anything to do with the contract with the city dump, but it expires at the end of this month. And anyway, I'm just curious if there could be an announcement of what's going to happen with that, because I'm a contractor and it depends what I do. Hey, thank you. And also the LTAC, the Library Tax Advisory Committee. I went to their meeting today, and I think the advisory needs to be emphasized. I think there was a miscommunication about who has control over what happens. And I don't know if I think the council here was supposed to recommend if a contract gets terminated or whatever. And I think there was a disagreement. They didn't realize that it could get, that they weren't the people to do the termination, and they also don't seem really clear on how to make a proposal for the future person that they want to hire or the future job constraints. So I appreciate Todd that he was there and willing to help with some of those really defining factors so that we treat people humanely and that we have clarity on what the library should do for this community. It seems that there's disagreement just within the 5 people there. So it's hard, and I don't know if you could make a flow chart of who makes the decisions so that some of this unfortunate stuff that has happened doesn't happen again, which it did happen. So I would just appreciate that going on, and whatever help can happen. And I know that puts more work on you guys, but I don't know what else to suggest that we can do this in a legal, a professional, and a humane way. And it's really hard in our community, I understand, because we're all so diverse. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi,
Hello.
Betty Krieger. So I learned just recently, I was unable to go to the April LTAC meeting, and I learned in the last week or so that Courtney had been fired. I was shocked, to say the least. For 7 years, Courtney has done a magnificent job, and you know, the children love her, the people love her. She's worked on so many things, helped us make presentations, and so forth. Today, I was able to go to the LTAC meeting late, and I learned that from Cheryl that a lot of those who attended the meeting on the 25th had made some very good points with regard to Courtney, as they did today. And there were like 25 people there. But they decided to go ahead and fire her anyway. They fired her pretty much without notice because they were supposed to, in April, they were supposed to give her a contract that she could review. And my understanding is that on May 3rd, she went to see Todd and she got fired. Now, apparently she's supposed to have been, she was told that she would have a contract through the summer, even though her contract ended in the end of June. So they did back off a bit and paid her through the end of June, but she was told she had to leave. Todd and others, including Cheryl, stated today that part of the problem, in fact, a large part of the problem was miscommunications between Courtney and LTAC. And yet, they went ahead and fired her anyway. And I'm sorry, I'm having to look at my notes. I'm in a lot of pain. Ted recommended that the new library director be able to negotiate her contract, but they didn't want to let Courtney negotiate her contract. There were things that they wanted her to do, like open the library 6 days a week, that she was objecting to. So there were a number of things that I also wrote a letter because I didn't think I was going to be able to go to the meeting. And I will forward that letter to you because there are many points in there that I am unable to bring up in my limited time here. So I think that, as the previous speaker said, perhaps the city council should take a little more active role in who is fired, just like they're taking an active role in who is hired. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Come on up.
Greetings, Francis Mangels, resident Mount Shasta. I also went to the meeting we had with the appointed kangaroo court over there by the library today. And we even had a kangaroo attending the meeting. Now, I think Courtney is one of the finest librarians I've ever met. And I've been doing libraries since I was about 8 or 9 years old. I'm an avid reader. In case you think I'm some dumb bunny, my IQ is 168, 154. I'm in the top 1%. And I think libraries are a very valuable asset to the community. And I feel that Courtney has been wrongly treated, if not illegally treated, by this appointed committee. And if we have an appointed committee that we don't know how they got there, but somebody put them there for some reason, I think we have a large danger of bias. We have a large danger of putting in some character from out of town that doesn't know how our kids need Courtney. They don't know how we adults who are here already need that library. I can give you several examples, but due to time, I won't give you those because they'll take up too much. I have other things to mention. The meeting was conducted in reasonable order, but what I saw out there was 6 people in a kangaroo court going to have their way whether you like it or not. Right-wing conservative authoritarianism. Holy cow! That is not democracy when you have right-wing authoritarians trying to run the government. That is not correct. This is a democracy where we vote on things. Okay, enough said on that. The other thing that I'm very worried about, 40 seconds to go, is I, as a retired Forest Service employee, retired note so I can say my piece without hampering now, they've done a really poor job on the fuel breaks up here along Everett Memorial Highway. You watch, and in 10 years it's going to look like the fuel breaks that they made over on the McLeod side. It's going to be sky-high Manzanita up to there, which does not stop a fire. If anything, it enhances it. Ask any firefighter, and you can see fires roar through Manzanita, and they did a real poor job with Napper. Enough said.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to come up and speak?
Yeah, I too am going to miss Courtney, and I know all the kids at the library are going to miss her too.
Can you state your name and where you live?
Tara Shuttleworth. So I am the one trying to get the art walk going. Right now, I'm just going to do them in businesses and go from there. I am working with the city right now to try and get banners up on Shasta Boulevard. So we're not relying on social media because we have a lot of people that don't rely on social media to find out about events. I was in contact with Ken Kellogg about this, and the information that he sent me, all I'm asking for is, how do I get banners up there? And I was given an attachment, which was 8 chapters long. Each chapter had like 21 sections. I don't understand why I am not just getting one piece of paper that says dimensions, maybe what type of font I can use, the price, what I can't say on a banner. I don't understand why I have to go through so much literature just to put banners up on Mount Shasta Boulevard. And I just hope that the city makes it a little bit easier for us to give you money so that we can promote our community events.
Thank you. Come on up.
Do we know if you guys listen to us and if what we're saying is being taken into consideration? Sometimes when I come to these meetings, I wonder why I'm coming.
I'm not sure what your question is.
Like, I mean, no, I didn't see anyone take down a note about the fact that I'm wanting a one-pager. Like, how do we know that, like, these are being addressed? Because I'm just asking for banners, and I'm required to read 8 chapters of something, you know? It's kind of,
This
I don't get
forum
it.
is for the public to come up and speak for 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So that, yeah, if you're wanting a private sit-down with Ken Kellogg or anyone in the city, then you can call us after and set something up. But this is just a forum to come up and speak.
Yeah, and that's another thing I've done. I've called the city quite a few times, and I never get calls back. In fact, I think, Mayor, when I reached out to you, I even let you know that the website wasn't updated with your information. I mean, I didn't even get a response from you.
I didn't see it. Sorry.
Okay, I sent it to your email. It was in regards to the newsletter that you guys were wanting to get going?
I haven't seen it.
Okay, well then maybe your email is wrong on your website as well. So you just might want to update your information with a photo and your email address, and then when I call you, you know, it would be nice to have our city manager's information updated on the answering machine. Just updates with contact information would be great.
Thank you.
Hi, and good
Hi.
afternoon.
Can you
My-
speak closer to the mic?
Okay,
Thank
how's
you.
that? Hi, my name is Jane Seeley, and I also attended the library meeting this afternoon. I think I have more questions than answers at this point about the decision-making process with the library. I understand the tax committee was formed after the 0.25% sales tax was added, and now they're looking at changing or deciding if they want to change the parameters of what they want a librarian to do. And my suggestion at this point is you need to get some community input, because putting an executive director in instead of a librarian changes the whole function. The library has been serving this community very well. Some of the issues seem to be changing the hours, getting volunteers, community outreach. And they were working with the previous librarian on these things, but didn't come to an agreement, so they terminated her contract. That's my understanding. And I think if it was a more open system where they reached out into the community to get more input as to what are feasible functions for the library within the community, and what even the city council would like to see the library be in this community. I think it's bigger than 2 committees. I can't even quite find out what the Friends of the Library do and what their power is in relation to the library, which was like, we don't have a flow chart. We don't know who decides what. And to change the direction, to consider changing the direction, it seems like it needs a bigger audience participation from the community to choose viable options for what we'd like to have next. And what we have now is very wonderful. I support Courtney. I appreciate everything she's done for the library and for the community, for all the kids, all the seniors, all the people in need of extra help in the library. And I'm sorry that the decision was quickly made to end her employment, and I hope we make better decisions in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to come up? Come on up.
I know we're all saying it, but I just want to say the same, that I...
Can you state your name,
Oh,
please?
so Lorraine Ramshaw.
Thank you.
And I've known Courtney for years. Since she first got here, she's volunteered and given so much of her heart and soul to the community. And it hurt my heart to see that she was terminated, just absolutely blindsided by this. It happens to be her birthday today. What a strange day, like, for all this to be going down about it. And so I'm just here in support of Courtney, and hopefully the powers that be can rewrite things so she can get back at her work, because she loves that work and she loves the kids.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to come up and speak?
I wasn't going to.
Come on up.
Well, my name is Val Silva. My kids have been up here since 2000, and I've been up here off and on since 2005. I worked down in the valley as an RN for 34 years as well. So I was saved, my life was saved by the library this winter. It was so dark, it was so white, and I was snowed in about 4 times. And where did I go when I got out? Is fast to the library. And this wonderful woman helped me out with books, ordering things. She was great. And there were all these little kids coming in after school, and she was great. And so this morning I was blindsided myself by seeing her being fired. And then when I attended the meeting this afternoon, one of the key things that came out for me is that somebody complained to her about a table that had COVID information on it, you know, wash your hands, wear a mask, all the safety things, and get your vaccinations, which is a personal decision. But anyway, somebody complained about that, but I don't think that complaint was brought to her initially. And it seems that in your way of evaluating things, this was handled somewhere in the dark ages of the 19th century. You need to, when somebody does something and gets a complaint, you have to give them a chance to say, hey, you know, this person has complained, so what is your side of the story, basically? And instead, it was just a horrible, horrible firing. And I kind of saw it happen last year with the Humane Society, where a really well-respected animal behavioralist was fired without any reason, just, you know, gone. They didn't have to give an explanation. So I'm seeing this trend here, and it's kind of disturbing that I know people are working hard, and it's fun, and there's all these people going around, and there was a lack of volunteerism there, but I think we're just coming out of the COVID thing. She's so busy now. The library is just teeming with people. And there's one reason, is because she's brought them in. And possibly we were talking about a volunteer group. There could be somebody that does do that, you know, that wants to do that. And there's a lot of volunteers around who have volunteered for this and that probably would be a good person to be involved in the library. But I want her back.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to speak? Anyone online?
Yes, we do.
All right, Vicki, begin when ready.
Vicki, go ahead.
Speakers. One thing I think that I have to say is the hurt, cold quality of the letter that Todd handed her when she requested the meeting on June 3rd was shocking to her. It was shocking to all of us who saw that letter. Not even a dear Courtney, but a very curt letter as if she had not served this community with all of her heart and soul for 7 years. When I called to ask for her, and several other people have in the last week, they are not even told the truth. They're told that she's not there and no, they can't leave a message. This isn't the way you handle something professionally. I believe because there were no routine job performances, as there are in most positions. Yes, she's an independent contractor, and she reported twice annually to the LTAC group, usually with, glowing reports about the number in circulation, the numbers of children's groups, etc. There was never an indication that I'm aware of that people were dissatisfied. So there was no job performance review that usually happens in a contract. And I think the shock when she was handed the letter, she actually just wanted to know what the results of the last LTAC meeting was and the closed session, because she hadn't been informed, although the president had handed her a letter saying that they were considering most likely extending her contract through the summer and discussing the 4 issues. So she was thinking, okay, well, they're going to meet with me. She asked Todd, he met with her and had this letter ready for her. She was in shock. Both her husband and her salary, their full life's financials are on the line, but that's the least of the problem. She didn't get to say goodbye to the children. She didn't get to tell people what was happening. I would encourage you to tell LTAC, they seemed more open after almost 30 of us appeared today. They seem more open to have her submit another contract. Well, if they had just met with her in closed session and said, look, we'd like you to write a contract for a full-time volunteer coordinator, a grant for that. Or we'd like you to stay open Monday, but we're going to give you more funds for it. There just wasn't good communication. Todd admitted that. He didn't know what was going on with the library, and he handed the letter, which follows the very minimum required, but it is not kind, it is not compassionate, it is not the way to do things in this heartful community. And people love Courtney. It's going to be very hard to find volunteers now that she is no longer there. I think it's extremely important to remember how dedicated she's been to the children for 7 years.
Thank you, Vicki.
And that's it for online.
Okay. We will close public comment and move on to council and staff comments. Todd, do you want to start us off?
So to start, we have a city planner that started this morning. Her name is Nancy Huff, and once she's up up to speed, I'll bring her to council and she can introduce herself. And so very happy that we have somebody on board. A lot has been going on. We are applying for a number of grants, 3 drainage projects we're seeking state revolving loan funds for, and we have a grant that is in for the library expansion. We have a grant that is going in for a community and corridor level alternative charging facilities, which would entail everything from compressed natural gas to electric vehicle charging stations, and Caltrans has partnered with us, and I'm blanking on the company. We need a private sector company that's involved and is, if we do this and we get the grant, it would have at the south end of town at the landing, it would have this alternative charging area, and Caltrans is excited about the idea, and if we put this in, they have talked about rebuilding the 89 interchange there. and it would bring a lot more people into town and would help further climate emission goals. So much more, but I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Anything, Chief, Muriel, Council? Nope. All right, committee updates.
So the DEAC met. I didn't get the notice on it and came in at the very end of it, so I didn't hear their updates. They're, the typical things they're looking for. They've got approval for spending engineering money to move the Flower of Life statue into place. They've got the Powerbox art contract and want to proceed with that. And they were under the impression that they had approval for new wayfinding signage. And when I spoke with the group, I mentioned that that's all stuff that would need to go through the Planning Commission. There needs to be some uniformity to it. It needs to pass muster with our sign code and go to the Planning Commission and then be approved by City Council to spend the money. So they're working on that. So that's the gist of that.
Okay. All right, moving on to item 7, consent agenda. The city manager recommends approval of the following consent agenda items. All resolutions and ordinances. Did you have any other committee updates?
Ted, did you want to give an update on LTAC? It's up to you.
I don't really speak for LTAC, but I am a member of LTAC. And since you've heard a lot about our meeting today, I guess maybe I should update you. First off, I'd like to clarify some semantics. We never recommended Courtney be fired. Courtney's an independent contractor, and her contract expires at the end of June of this year. So at our meeting in April, May, we had a number of issues that had come to our attention about the current contract, and our recommendation at that point was that we not renew the contract unless some effort was made to address these issues. And there were 4 main issues that I assume I can speak about now. So one was the hours of operation. One was cooperation and coordination with volunteer groups. One was programming, and the other one was developing a policy for displays in coordination with the American Library Association guidelines. So those were communicated to Courtney, I believe, by the president of LTAC shortly after our meeting, the first part of May, when our minutes were issued. And my understanding of that was she indicated that she wasn't intent on meeting any of those 4 requirements, that they were not possible or not something she wanted to do. And then at that point, that the president of LTAC communicated that to the city manager, who basically issued a letter to Courtney saying we would not renew her contract after June 30th. At our meeting today, we decided we should go out with an RFP for library management services, just like we've done starting in 2012 when we first got the library tax increment passed, and go forward from there. And then we discuss what that contract should entail. There was some discrepancy on the part of LTAC whether we should look more towards somebody with executive director skills or somebody with library skills. And we basically didn't make a determination of that. I think that's something we look at in terms of when we get proposals, if we do get proposals. And basically, I had said at the meeting that I would invite Courtney to reapply if she wants to do that and understands what the requirements of the position or the contract would be. So
Thank you very much, Ted. All right, consent agenda 7. City manager recommends approval of the following consent agenda items. All resolutions and ordinances on this agenda or added hereto shall be introduced or adopted as applicable by title only, and the full reading thereof is hereby waived. A, approval of minutes, May 22nd, 2023, regular city council meeting. B, approval of disbursements, accounts payable 5/19 and 5/22/23, total gross payroll and payroll taxes for period ending 5/14/23. C, committee minutes, beautification committee, April 2023. D, second reading and adoption of ordinance CCO-23, amending section 10.44.080 of the Mount Shasta Muni Code. And E, police department report, May 2023.
Regarding the police report?
Sure.
Chief, I'm not going to ask you to give information now necessarily, but I think it'd be helpful if the city council had information as to the locations of the various collisions. It looks like there's somewhere between 24 and 58 collisions over the past year, with 14 of those having injuries. I appreciate the opportunity, perhaps at the next meeting or when you can, to give us more information as to particular locations in Mount Shasta where the collisions occurred, and perhaps the nature of the injury, so that we can look at the possibility of taking steps to avoid collisions at those spots in the future.
Also, what is the ordinance number for item D? Do we have that?
I don't.
Okay.
To be filled in.
Yeah.
So I'll move to consent agenda item A through E by title only.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Item 8, discussion and possible action amendments to Mount Shasta, City of Mount Shasta SB2 Planning Grants Program funds. Todd?
Yes, so we have, as you know, SB2 funding that allowed us to get through the housing element and get it submitted to HCD. As we went through the process, we learned that there are a number of new state regulations that have come down the pike, and we're simply trying to reprogram some remaining SB2 funds, which were set aside for creating free ADU plans. If you remember the whole idea of lot splits that was passed by the state as a way to increase housing stock of lower income housing, and we haven't had much in the way of takers on that. And the county has produced free ADU plans, and they're still available to anybody that wants them. We want to reprogram that money to meet state law in terms of we need to adopt new zoning ordinances, such as emergency housing shelters for homeless during weather events. We need to streamline the zoning code and permitting and approval process for affordable housing, and there are a couple other things that we need to do. So we're just we're reworking those funds to get those things done to meet state requirements.
Any questions? Yeah.
We did receive a letter from a citizen sometime today or this afternoon about the ADU. And he indicated in that letter that apparently the various other cities that were cited in the report would not make their ADU plans available to anyone except citizens of those communities. Can you perhaps work with those communities to see if they might be willing to share their ADU, pre-approved ADU plans with the city of Mount Shasta so that we can, in fact,
Yeah, I know
adopt those.
that the county will, and I've also talked to the city of Wairika, and they will as well. I don't know about the other cities, but I find it baffling that they wouldn't share them.
Yeah. And the for clarification also, ADUs doesn't involve a lot split. It is actually putting a accessory dwelling unit on an existing lot.
It can, but it's
Yeah.
also the ability to take a lot and subdivide it and actually put 2 ADUs on one and 2 ADUs on the other with the house. So, and since that's passed and there is an aversion to an increase in affordable housing in the city and from some sectors, so I think there has been downward pressure on those that may have taken advantage of that state law, and we've seen little interest. But if somebody's running into problems and they need an ADU plan, they can certainly contact me and I can get that for them.
Well, I appreciate that. In the past, we had talked about a possibility of coming up with pre-approved regular house plans so that somebody who chose one of those models wouldn't have to go through the process of engineering and so on. So I think it's a good idea.
I do.
But I also understand the reason for making a request for modification of this grant funding, which I support.
I think, and if we were to chase the other, I think it's a good idea. We would have to consider that a different project. For us, the idea of having Plan West, who's been steeped in our housing element for more than a year now, following through on writing the necessary ordinances and zoning code updates makes sense, and let's get it done so we're not getting crosswise with HCD.
Yeah, I agree.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll open up for public comment. Anyone online? Todd?
No.
I think that Jeffrey, a couple weeks ago when he was saying the need for a newsletter, I think what is going on right now with our library, it shows right there the need for our community to be informed. There are so many of us that are upset to know that Courtney's gone.
Sorry, we're only talking about agenda item 8 right now.
Okay.
All right, we will close public comment, back for council discussion. Yeah. Is there a motion?
No questions. I would invite a motion to adopt this resolution.
All right, he's invited, so I'll be the one making the motion. Motion to approve resolution CCR-23- I think it's 50.
To be
I'll
determined.
have to find out from Kathy when she's back.
Possibly 50. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Mount Shasta authorizing filing an amendment to the City of Mount Shasta's SD Planning Grant Program application.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, agenda item number 9, fiscal year 23-24 budget. Muriel?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight, we have an updated general fund budget as well as the rest of the budget as promised. What happened at the last meeting was the starting balance for the general fund was incorrect, and what we needed to have was audited financial statement balances, which have now been reflected in the proposed operating budget. The result of that changed the balances moving forward. the contingency reserves and the percentages there. I'm happy to answer, nothing else changed. I'm happy to answer any further questions about the general fund budget. Moving on to the enterprise funds as well as the rest of the special revenue funds. And then we can take questions at the end if that works for y'all. Okay. In the drainage fund, we're still having issues, of course, with getting the Proposition 218 process moving along. And so we do have some shortfalls in that fund as our rates are at $1 per property at this point, which is not going to be enough to do the 3 projects that we have grant funding moving for. But we also have other drainage concerns that are going to have to be taken care of. So this is just a heads up. In solid waste fund, we're continuing to negotiate between the city and waste management to determine which entity will be doing the billing moving forward. We've had some issues having to deal with the city doing the billing and waste management taking care of all of the rest of things, and the communication between us and them and our customers has been confusing for our customers, and we're trying to figure out a way to provide a better service for our customers, which may mean that waste management will be doing the billing for the city of Mount Shasta for solid waste. But that will come to you if that ever comes to fruition. In the water and wastewater funds, we've got several projects going on, as you are aware of. The state-mandated wastewater treatment plant is moving along well. I believe they plan to have it up and operational in June or perhaps July.
July now.
July.
Yep.
Okay, so that's coming to an end. Additionally, we've also got the interceptor project in the sewer fund, and that's moving along very well. As you can see, the construction going on out in the Morgan Field and all of those places out there. So that's going to be coming to an end too, probably by the fall. In the water fund, we have the Oak Street project, which is an IRWIM project, which is funding the Oak Street area water line improvement program. That will probably be starting in July. It'll be a relatively quick project, probably to be done by the end of August or September, the actual construction. In the special revenue funds, moving along, gas tax and transportation funds, I'll be working with the Public Works Director to determine some projects moving forward. Now that he's getting his feet under him, we'll be discussing and developing plans for what to use our gas tax funds and our transportation funds that we've been building up over the past several years to see, what projects are going to come to the forefront there. In the CDBG fund, we're continuing to fund food and subsistence programs, which is actually food and subsistence programs that are throughout the entire county, that the city of Mount Shasta is actually doing the payments, and Great Northern Services is doing the monitoring and that sort of thing, as well as Siskiyou Economic Development. So it's a good partnership with those 2 nonprofits in the city to provide those services for people throughout the county. We have been successful in the senior snow removal grant. We hope to have that grant signed, sealed, and delivered before the snow flies. So people will be able to apply for the senior snow removal. We really missed it last year as we didn't have it, and I think people are going to be very glad to have it come back. In Brownfield, we were also successful in funding the last piece, hopefully, of the stockpile removal at the Roseburg site, and moving also with that grant of $674,000 to determine which areas are going to be fully cleared, which areas may have some restrictions as determined by the California Department of Hazardous Waste and the EPA, and being able to actually develop that land. The rest of the special revenue funds are as they always are, and I'm now happy to take any questions and comments from you.
Councilmember Stagfleth and I had two different ideas about what the beginning balance at the beginning of 22-23 were as far as the general fund reserves. He is thinking it's 2.7 million, and what you handed out to us from the auditing was 2.6, and you know, will the winner stand up? I don't really care which one it is. I just would like to know what it is.
I was looking at draft review then.
Okay, no, I don't know. It's okay. I'm not trying to make any waves or anything. A good starting point is probably, if we're going to take a trip, ought to know where we are.
So the total fund balance is the 2.741054. Of that balance, 16,100 is unspendable, and 122,314 is committed. What's going on to the general fund for use in this spreadsheet is the unassigned, which is 2.602640.
Hence are coming from different places. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that.
For reference, it's on page 7 of your audit, which all of you should have copies of.
And looking at the agenda packet, is there reference or clarification in, somewhere between page 49 and...
I don't have the agenda
67?
packet. I have my spreadsheet.
That's what I brought with me.
Okay.
All right.
So on the first page of the City of Mount Shasta proposed operating budget 22, 23, 24. At the top of the page, the final budget for 22-23 is 2,602,640 as presented in the audit.
Only question I have for you, Muriel, unaudited final actual numbers from your desk, September maybe for 23?
Yeah, and I'm already starting to work on this stuff back then, so it was totally an oversight on my part, and I apologize profusely.
You're going to end in June 30th. You'll have good numbers for us in September, right?
I'm hoping to, yes. I'm hoping to actually have the auditor there in September. That's about the time we actually get all of our accruals done, so I hope to have that ready then.
At the meeting last time, and I wasn't in attendance, but I believe a healthy fund balance, the cutoff or reserve for the general fund is about 20%. And at the last meeting, it was said that we were at about 16%, which caused some concern. But now it looks like we're at 38%. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so much better and way over our 20%.
And it also gives you over 28% for the proposed 23-24 budget, which is now at 28%.
Okay. And then what programs are in the community promotion and visitors category, totaling $140,000?
There's $75,000 for the Visitors Bureau. Let me get to the line.
Okay.
I know that one just off the top of my head. The museum, I believe, is at $5,000. The SORA is at $5,000. The Economic Development Council is, I believe, at 30. So I'd have to check the line item. Hold on.
Okay. Uh, 55.
$30,000 economic development expense, Visitors Bureau 75,000, special department expenditures at 7,500. So one is at 5,000 and one is at 2,500, and I don't remember which is which. Okay.
And where would the contract with Josh Thomas and the social media program be?
It's not there.
Okay.
And until, in my opinion, until we see the results of what this program has done and what you've paid for it, it would be up to council to decide if it's actually worth spending the money on that particular thing, which I would happily do a budget amendment when that happens.
Well, I think he had tried to come to propose before the budget was in front of us, so it seems like a kind of a battle uphill to go backwards. But I would like for those things not to be handpicked about what's in the budget and what isn't before it's in front of us, if a contract is being renewed. And this is about 2% of the general fund of our budget and numbers. So what I am going to, we can talk about this during discussion, but I would propose just a flat 3% be held so that it's not handpicked and that we can.
Josh is going to be at the next council meeting.
Okay, but I would like to not have
Yep,
it be after the fact moving forward. It seems, if I hadn't noticed and that kind of thing, I would like it to be transparent and we know what's going on. Excuse me. Any other questions from council?
Yes, Muriel, when you talk about reserve percentage on page 50 or otherwise, what number is the reserve percentage a percentage of?
Revenue. Total revenue.
Okay, so it's not the total budget, it's the percentage of the...
Total budgeted revenue.
General fund.
Correct.
And is that for the prior year or the projected new year?
Both.
Well, the percentage would be different, so...
Correct, and the percentages are different in those columns.
All right, so and I'm looking at 2023, 2024, it says projected carryover 2.163 million on page 50. And then I have a different figure I saw of 1.687 million. And that would be projected for the 24-25?
That's for the 23-24.
The 23-24
Which is the proposed budget.
drops down from
Yeah, so
2.163 million down to 1.687 million.
Correct.
Okay, so that's all right, so this is the beginning and then the after. That's actually not quite clear, but I'm getting okay. The proposed budget that we have before us tonight has a projected loss of $439,000 or $476,000. I've got, again, two different figures.
2 different years.
Okay, so 439 for
The year that we're in,
2022, 2023.
correct?
And then a higher projected loss for 2023-24.
Correct?
All right. So between those 2 years, losing almost $1 million of funds.
950.
Okay. My experience in the past is that we have tried to have balanced budgets for most of our years, and I'm sure that you tried to do that again this year. True or not?
True.
If we were to have a balanced budget, which I think is important, and would be fiscally responsible for our community and our constituents, can staff recommend perhaps 2 or 3 different alternative pathways to us to have a balanced budget for the 2023-24 budget year?
I believe I discussed that at our last meeting pretty thoroughly. One of the examples which you're all aware of is an increase in TOT tax to go on the ballot. That's not reflected here. It simply comes down to you increase revenue or you cut personnel. That's what it boils down to. Or perhaps you don't cut personnel, perhaps you cut the amount of time people are at work. Some other places in this county, they're only open 4 days a week instead of 5. That would be a 20% reduction in salaries. We would then need to deal with, people would then need to deal with, at least employees would need to deal with whether or not they stay with a 20% reduction in salary. It really boils down to you increase revenue or you decrease and cut expenses. And the largest part of the expenses here, I believe Jeffrey and I calculated the percentage of employee cost with benefits and everything at, was it 69, 68, 69%. So that's really what it boils down to, which we talked about at length at the last council meeting.
Well, I'm going to ask that we talk about it a little more tonight.
That's fine.
So what if we were to try to avoid a almost $500,000 loss for budget year 23-2024, $476,000. What percentage adjustment would be required in terms of employee work hours?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't be a 20% cut. So what might it be?
Like I said, I don't have that at the top of my head.
We've got about $4 million being spent on payroll, cash, wages, and salaries, and their benefits. Anyhow, the combination is a little over $4 million. So 10%.
10%.
10% would cover it, plus TOT. Again, we can have a discussion at the public hearing, but public comments, but.
So 10% is a little over $400,000, and then TOT is about $245,000 without any changes like rate increases at motels, an additional motel, keeping things status quo. A 2% increase is about $245,000.
And we talked at the last meeting about that we all hoped a 2% TOT increase would be received favorably by the citizens of Mount Shasta. They would vote in favor of that. but do we have a contingency plan in place, or what is our plan if that doesn't pass?
I would think that, and I was going to bring this up for future agenda items, but it's pertinent now, that we reinstate the finance committee and meet monthly and go over actuals more regularly, because this is just a stab in the dark, a best guess at what our sales and TOT tax will be over the summer and forward. So I do think that we need to compare to actuals much more frequently, because I think Muriel is historically pretty conservative on the revenue side. So I would suggest we start there before we have a backup plan.
I think, well, I hear that. And having the finance subcommittee meet on a regular basis may very well be helpful to us. At the same time, I think that it would be prudent for us to have a contingency plan in place before we adopt this budget, which is assuming or hoping that the 2% TOT ballot proposition will pass. And I think we owe it to the city and to the citizens to have an idea now what might happen, rather than last minute down the line. So that's why I'm asking, and it may be that we don't have that at this meeting, but I would certainly like to have that when we discuss the final budget at the next city council meeting. Is that possible?
It's up to the council.
All right, let's open up for public comment, and then we'll come back to discussion. Anyone? Do you have more questions?
I do.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks. All right, and I provided a list of questions to staff earlier today. Looking at July 2024, based on the wage and salary increases we recently made for city staff, the increased insurance costs that you talked about at the last meeting, and the historic requests from the various city departments. Without more, I'd like to have staff provide the council with the projected general fund expenses for the 2024-2025 fiscal year. Because I would anticipate that those expenses are going to even further exceed the revenues, and I want to know, bottom line, what we might be looking at in terms of a potential further loss there. So my second question was, assuming the 2% TOT ballot proposition does not pass, what are the general fund projected revenues for 2024-2025 fiscal year? The third question is, based on the foregoing two numbers, general fund expenditures are expected to exceed general fund revenues by approximately how much in that following year of 2024-2025? And finally, if the City Council were to adopt the proposed 2023-2024 budget as presently fashioned, and based on the answers to the foregoing questions, what does city staff project the carryover or reserve to be as of June 30, 2025? And I ask that because it looks like we are going down $400,000 to $500,000 a year in rough numbers.
I think that's a reasonable request to ask for a second-year budget.
Thank you.
Any other questions over here on this side? No. Okay, we are going to open it for public comment. Anyone in the audience wish to speak? Anyone online, Todd? Anyone online?
No one online.
Okay. We will close public comment and bring it back to council. I would like to, are you going to go over your spreadsheet?
May I?
Yeah, because that has a good point in there.
I handed out some kind of headline numbers to the council that starts with, and its whole point is really just a historical perspective on where we started this year. We started out with $2.6 million in our reserves, plus or minus 100,000, John, close. And the point is, that's a historic high in percentage and absolute numbers, wildly larger than anything we have ever had in this community. We have a once-in-a-generation, if not a lifetime, excess funds. And the question for me that it is bothering me anyway is, well, what are we going to do with it? What's best for staff and what's best for the citizens of the town? With the current budget, or final current budget for this year, and the proposed budget for next year, we're slated to lose $915,000 of that $2.6 million, with primarily due to salary increases for staff. That has occurred. It's water under the bridge, as the saying goes. So to look at where do we go from here? What might we do in this proposed budget to reduce the loss such that we could have money for projects in this town, like potentially revenue-generating projects for economic development, or whatever the council and city manager think are the things that would best benefit the town and its citizens as a whole. Because blowing through $915,000 in 2 years makes me queasy. I'm not comfortable with that. Now, yes, we have this spectacular reserve that's way higher than we quote-unquote need, but it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to ask, well, what could we do with it? And given that it's going up this projected year, next year versus this year, are there any steps that we should take? That some things that we should cut out to save to going forward to projects elsewhere? And we're not making decisions tonight. It's just discussing potential options. But we've got a $75,000 annual contribution to an equipment replacement fund. Don't think we should make it this year. We got a $40,000 contract for this wonderful audiovisual services that we have. I suggest we should spend nothing. Go back to the way we did it for 20 years. Spend nothing on it. We've got potentially anyway the concept of a hiring and salary freeze for COLA and STEP until we have a balanced budget. There's the contract for the social media contract. I suggest we look at what things are on the table, even though we want them and we'd like them, and maybe we should have them. I'm not trying to say we should or shouldn't. I'm just trying to say $476,000 projected loss for next year makes me, I just can't sign up for that without some deep conversation on how could we spend less money. It's a historic loss in total revenue and percentage terms. It's just a lot of loss. We're spending too much money. To answer Councilmember Stern's question, what contingency plans, what happens if we don't get the TOT passed? I spent 40 years running budgets and numbers and revenue projection forecasts, and so I ran one, which is part of what I handed out. We would end up breaking even at the end of 3 years and have somewhere between 900,000 and 1.1 million left in our reserves account. It's not the end of the world. You know, we'd make it. And that's based on everything that's already in the budget. For me, it gets back to that question, well, okay, we went from 2.6 to 1.1 over 4-ish years, and we gave salary raises to the staff, which is done. The question is, what else can we do so we don't lose so much money? What else do we want to do that we might want to spend the money on differently than we currently have it allocated? That's how I wanted to start.
Public comment's already been done for the portion. We already closed public comment?
Be back in 2 weeks.
We have protocols for the meeting, so it'll be back on the agenda for the next meeting if you wish to speak then.
Okay, so, my thoughts on this are, yeah, it'd be great to continue to run surpluses, akin to what we did last fiscal year. I think that the revenue numbers are very conservative, so I'm eager to see what we come up with as the final numbers for the 23 year end come September. I think the only way to really balance this budget, since you can't bank the TOT tax increase, is to get a 10% concession of some sort, or you cut staff by 10%, equivalent to 10% of the current salary level. It's about 5 people. If the average cost is $75,000 an employee, which I think is probably might be higher on average. How many people work for the city now, Bob?
35.
Yeah, so you're talking about dropping down to
35.
3-5?
In that situation, you have some morale issues, certainly have people trying to do more work than they might think is feasible, certainly might have some overtime situations that go up substantially to negate part of the savings. It's something that staff will have to look at really, really minutely to see, okay, if we cut one person, how much overtime is that going to lead to, if any, that type of thing. But I think there's no way to get around it. If you're serious about balancing the budget in advance of, in other words, it's the projected budget. You believe the revenue numbers, the conservative numbers. You don't want to take any chance of losing money, then you have to cut staff. I don't think the employees will like the idea of cutting their salaries. It's a possibility, I guess, maybe if you drop 10%, temporary 10% pay increase, or you can do something interesting like 10% drop this year, pay it back later type of thing if they're still employed here. You can do some interesting things with labor contracts. So something for staff to consider. Take 10% cut now, you get back, if the budget is better than we thought, 5% additionally for 2 years after that. Do things like that. But it's about the labor. You can cut 100,000 a year, maybe, in discretionary spending, but it doesn't get you to a balanced budget. You can have to invest in the labor situation, for sure. It's a matter of how ingenious you want to be with that particular category. So if we're that serious about having a budget that projects a surplus, then you immediately have to go to figuring out a 10% cut in labor costs. The discretionary things that we're talking about, they're about 3% of the budget, so, okay, fine, cut all those things, economic development, visitor center, if you do that, then it's a 7% cut for the labor side of things. That's what you're looking at doing if you're really serious about running a surplus. And of course, is the TOT tax ballot measure to be in November or in March?
November.
Okay, so.
November.
Of this year or next year?
This year. Off year
It's an
election.
off year, so we're gonna pay for that. Something like 23,000.
Yeah.
Okay, so it takes a while for that money to start coming in, and you invested $23,000 in that ballot measure. I think the cumulative effects of the TOT tax, if it passes, are going to be smaller than $245,000 for 2024. The greater impact will be in 24-25. So I just don't think you should budget for that, regardless, even if it's 100% short pass. This is going to take time to realize a return on that tax increase. So those are my thoughts. It's really a matter of deciding whether we must have a projected surplus. And I'm not that hyper about it. Normally I would be. I would be definitely consider myself more of a fiscal conservative, and I'm definitely more of a deficit hawk. But we've had such conservative revenue projections, and we've had this steady increase in reserves, meaning that there was a surplus somewhere. We can go back and analyze it, such that we end up at 2.6 is over 40%, right? It's 44%. Oh, okay, so now you want to spend that money on other things in labor. Okay, not a bad idea. The Oak Street project would have cost $1 million. That's a really short street to change the water pipes in there. Okay. That $2 million, let's say $2 million, is not going to do much. It's about $1 million. It's at least $1 million a mile to pay for it, repay for it. And we're talking about the type where you get down and repack the
Subgrade. Yep.
Yeah, and it's at least $1 million a mile. We have 26 miles in Shasta, half of which need to be repaid and rehabilitated, not just overlaid. They need to be scratched down to the dirt.
Yeah.
We get excited about the $2 million, but when you start looking at what you can really do with $2 million, it's not that much. It's not that much. The projects you're talking about doing will have to be small. To put a roof on the ice skating rink is going to be $1.5 million. Okay, just to let you know. And that is way cheaper than I thought it would be.
Right.
I'd wipe out that budget number, that surplus in one project. So I think we really have to take a good hard look over the next 2 weeks about what our goals are. We have to take into consideration morale and attitudes of our staff and the efficiencies of what morale can promote. So those are my thoughts. Tough one, but I'm definitely more bullish on our revenue numbers than what Muriel has given us. But she needs to be conservative on those numbers, and that's been her history. Thankfully, we've had some good experience lately, and part of that is grants, special grants and so forth. And we have that happening in the near-term future too. Process 64, right? Yeah. So Yeah, deep thoughts about this one.
I wanted to shed some light, or not shed some light, but look at how we've been increasing salaries over the last 6 to 8 months or longer. And we can't in the same breath say we have a 40% reserve, we need to go spend the money, and also we need to cut salaries or time spent in the city or our relationships with our nonprofits when we are taking a guess, a very conservative guess at what the revenue numbers will be when we have full lakes, no smoke, knock on wood. We are geared up to have record-breaking visitors coming to town. So my prerogative, my opinion is to wait for this backup plan so that we don't scare our staff or our network before we have to. And I do think that that reserve can be there to capture whatever loss might happen. But we need to meet regularly, go over the actuals, and see where we end up.
From my perspective, we can probably find $100,000 or more in this budget to cut without great pain. Councilmember Collings talked about deferring the $75,000 transfer to the equipment fund. That's something that we have done in the past. We have tried to make that contribution every year in recent years, but that might be a prudent thing to hold off on doing for the time being, recognizing that if the TOT tax proposition does pass, we can make a mid-year budget adjustment. In terms of, and my thinking in terms of the reserve is that it ought not to be based upon a percent of the revenues, but it ought to be based on a percent of the overall budget, because that's money to be used in the case of a shortfall or unforeseen circumstances. So when we're talking about a percent, we really should be basing that on a percent of the overall budget. Fine to base it on a percent of the revenues if the revenues and the expenses balance. But at this point, we're not looking at that. So I really think that we should adjust our reserve number to be based upon the budget instead of projected revenues. The Councilmember Stackplough talked in terms of coming up with a budget that has a surplus, and that is really different than the idea of coming up with a balanced budget so that the expenses don't exceed the revenues. And I'm not looking for staff to come up with a budget where we have a surplus, but at least a budget where the revenues and the expenditures match. I would suggest that staff can propose to us 2 or 3 different alternatives of how to balance this budget for the year 2023, 2024. It could be done various ways. One way was suggested cutting hours. Another way was suggested cutting the number of personnel. Again, we are talking about making a budget with the assumption, we're talking about making a budget that balances without the assumption that, yes, in fact, the 2% TOT tax ballot proposition will pass. And I agree with Councilmember Stackflef that we should not make a budget making that assumption. If it does pass, then we can have the flexibility of adjusting the hours that we thought we were going to have to cut back, or the personnel that we thought we'd have to cut back, or as we did in past years, basically have freezes when there's a reduction in personnel by attrition. We left certain positions vacant so that we didn't go further in the hole. And I would encourage us and ask for the support of the other council members that we not only look at the 2023-2024 projected income and expenses, but we also consider probable income and expenses for the 24-25 year, not necessarily coming up with a 2-year budget and exact numbers, but at least having some relatively informed information so that we know whether we're going to lose another $400,000 or $500,000 in that next year, or perhaps even more. At least having.
We do. It's already in there.
It's already in there, Tim. Miriam has this decline to 1.6 million reserve, which would be 28% for the end of 25, fiscal 25. So we're still healthy with respect to reserve. What we have here is a discussion about whether we want to run deficits. And it was that simple. The problem I had is I'm not really comfortable making decisions without the final numbers in 23. Because 22 was supposed to be a lot worse than it ended up being, and it ended up being quite rosy. So I would like the final numbers, but that has to wait until Labor Day or a little bit after. So I'm sort of in this holding pattern of saying, okay, pass this budget, yeah, we're going to have a loss, but let's see what really transpires for the end of 23, find out what the real starting point is.
If I may. Muriel, you've been doing this for years. Very skillfully. Knowing what you know now, do you expect that there will be no deficit that for the 2022-2023 year, that there isn't going to be a loss?
What I've presented to you is what I believe where we're going to end up with the budget. Now, yes, I tend to be very conservative when it comes to revenue figures. I'm happy to go through and look at those revenue figures again and take a look at the trends for the percentages, which I typically do anyway. And if all you're asking for is a balanced budget, I can easily increase revenue to balance the budget. What I've given you is where I think we're going to be. That's my job.
John, I was listening to you about really making decisions once we have actual numbers, and it's kind of hard to argue with. You know, it's like there's enough variables, significant variables with revenue, and my perspective going forward with this starts with looking backward, which was over the last 12 months, all of us up here approved about $350,000 or $400,000 worth of salary increases. And we were told there would not be a balanced budget this year because of those salary increases. There would not be a balanced budget next year because of those salary increases, or the year after that. It would likely be between year 3 and year 4 until we got back to a balanced budget. We all knew that. This was made clear to us. The numbers were roughly 400,000 this year, 200,000 or 300,000 in year 2, somewhere around 200, then in 100. So in other words, somewhere around $900,000 would come out of the reserve fund to fund these salary increases. We got presented with those numbers. We're not going to have a balanced budget this year or next year. It's not going to happen. My concern is what looked, as Muriel has to look into a crystal ball and try and make predictions of 400, then 300, then 200, all of a sudden went 440 or whatever that number ends up to be, and I think it's good to wait for that. But then the projection for this coming year is not heading in the right direction. It's not going down to 300. It looks like it's going up to 475. And that is what prompted me to come with a perspective of, well, maybe we do need to shave 100,000 or.
What was the difference, Muriel, between those two? Between which?
The difference was, wait, I have that answer. It's the answer is liability and workers' comp, because the pool of salaries went up so much. All of a sudden, our workers' comp went up, and we had some significant losses that we had to write checks for. That was about 75,000 of unexpected numbers coming in. And then there was a couple of 10,000s and 15,000s here and there, but that's the big chunk of why all of a sudden it didn't head in the right direction, which when I ran these numbers for not next year, but the year after, my guess, it'll be fun to see, was we'll end up with about 320,000 in the hole. And 2 years after that, we'll break even, is what looking at, I went
And
back.
not with TOT in there.
That's what's with no TOT. It's not the end of the world. We'll be okay. It's just that question of, well, hey, we got this big number. What might we want to ask and represent the citizens and go spend some of that money elsewhere? And that's all. But if Muriel, may I ask, or maybe it's city manager, if we pass a budget that basically is what we were presented today, and for whatever reason we end up changing nothing because we're going to wait really for another 3 months and figure out what the real numbers are or the actual numbers are, what changes can we make? Can we make, like, 4 months later, based on actuals, make changes to the budget? I mean, we make mid-year budget adjustments. Do we have to wait till the mid-year? I mean, are there guidelines for that?
Well, like we did with COVID, the first year of COVID, we made, I think, 3 different budget amendments. You can do budget amendments all the time. Once you have the information, you can say. All the time.
Oh, yeah.
Not necessarily in the entirety.
Right.
But what you're talking about is in the entirety, and yes, you can. There are budget adjustments that happen for particular line items. I know that we had to spend $15,000 to fix a sweeper, or fill in the blank. That would be a budget adjustment that in many cases is just held over till mid-year and explained at that point. Or if it's something more serious, then you would have that budget amendment coming to you immediately to say, this is what's come down the pipe, and just to let you know, these are the decisions that need to be made.
Thank you.
To the chair.
Yes.
Okay. So when it comes down to getting rid of personnel, potentially, we're just going to be hit with people wanting a pay raise anyways, in my opinion, because they're going to see themselves as doing the work of two, potentially. If we get rid of people and now they have more work, it's just the way it's going to go. I listen to people complain about that all the time at my bar, that I got to do this extra work, I should be paid extra, blah, blah, blah. But even without the TOT, anything that way, I think what we just need to work on still, since we're so heavily reliant on TOTs and sales tax, is just what I have to do with my place. Get more butts in the seats, get more people here, get them coming here still, just make up some difference that way, whatever it is. More art walks, more festivals, make 4th of July even bigger, the light, the Christmas light thing, just whatever, even just if I can pull off a ping pong tournament on Chestnut Street or something, shutting that down. I mean, I was trying to make some extra, just like, what can I do to make more money in my place? Throw a ping pong tournament. I got 15 people spending $40. Just made an extra $600 on the night just by having one ping pong table going. So just for me, I think what we, some of the things to help make sure that we're getting those butts in the seats is something that me and Karen went through on Mother's Day. We walked to 3 different restaurants on Mother's Day trying to find dinner, and they were all closed by 7:30, 7:45. For various reasons. One place shut down because the kitchen printer didn't work, and therefore the chef closed everything because they were tired of handwritten tickets. I'm sorry, but that's pathetic. All right, just take the orders. Give the people their food. It's Mother's Day, and you're turning away people left and right at these 3 different restaurants. And I'm literally watching other people walk around to the same restaurants that I'm going to, and it's 7:30, 7:45, and they can't get anything. So some of that is just, we gotta just stay open later. I mean, this town the sidewalks roll up by 7:30, 8 o'clock. My kitchen goes till 10 o'clock 5 nights a week, and I hear plenty of people saying, thank God, can't find anything after 8:30. So if we're trying to be this tourist town, we gotta keep some stuff going that way. And I realize, other places can argue it's extra overhead that way, but I mean, we're talking trying to be a tourist town. We've gotta give these people what they need, or what they're used to with the town they're coming from. If they're coming up from Reading and we close at 8 and they're used to everything down there being open past 10, I should say 9 anyways, just that's what they're gonna be looking for. And if we don't have that, great, they came here and they're gonna go somewhere else potentially. So even that can just, just whether or not the TOT goes through or not, but just trying to get more people to come to town, but give them some reasons. Just keep we're on a good track, but just keep it going. Just trying, we had Grind Duro. What do we lose them after next year? Because we only had the 5-year contract. Well, then, can we get anybody the bike shops around here to pool together and do our own Mount Shasta Grind Duro? Just to get some of those same people to come back, because we're doing something on the same trails that another group has already done. I mean, half the volunteers that were working and setting up and cleaning everything were from these bike shops or guides themselves. I mean, just, before we start just really getting rid of people, I agree there's a lot of other stuff we can cut that way, even just, we just find stuff that way, but we just got to get, still keep working to get just more butts in the seats. Just keep people coming here. But some things have to change that way to where town stays open longer than 8 o'clock. So, anyways.
I hear you. We don't control what private industry does.
No, I know.
And whether restaurants serve food.
No, but we all have the power to talk to the different ones that
things.
we talk to that way, just like, let's just work together a little bit on this to keep people wanting to come here and just, just make it more than a one-time thing to where if they come here and they see everything is just, fun until 5 o'clock, it's going to change things.
We're also dealing with a proposed budget of having a loss of almost $500,000. And the question is, are we comfortable with that? Are there ways to balance the budget? Or if we can't balance the budget, are there ways to at least reduce the loss, the net loss? Councilmember Collins suggested deferring the $75,000 equipment transfer to the equipment replacement fund. $75,000 doesn't balance this budget, but it gets us closer to having less of a negative budget. What we've done sometimes in the past is we have not included that $75,000 transfer until we see how the numbers came in. And then after the numbers came in, we decided whether we had the funds to make the transfer or not. I would suggest that at the very least, we consider doing that in this budget as well.
No, I'm just suggesting that before we just start immediately cutting things, we try and just make sure to get some extra money coming in. You know, show some effort from our citizenry that you've mentioned that we're representing with all these budgets. You know, just get the citizenry on board, you know, just like, okay, you know, let's make some changes wholesale, you know, collectively that way before we just, you know, just like, oh, we don't have the money, okay, bye-bye, you five are out of a job. You know, and then we go through the morale problem that way.
We knew that it was going to be an unbalanced budget
Yeah, I mean-
going into this when we all agreed to all of the salary increases.
Mhm.
Cutting salaries or hours or projects should have been brought up during that time. Muriel, outside of Josh Thomas, was there any other contract renewal at 6:30 that you left out of the budget?
No.
Okay, can you put that back in for the next
I
meeting?
need to know what the offer is. I don't know what he's even asking for.
Well, are all of the other ones based on offers?
They're based on what they've had from prior year. But as
Maybe-
I recall, in the meeting, you guys were going to take a look at the data and make a decision then, because you had, I think, 2 or 3 different ranges that you were looking at that time. And you picked a particular range, and then you were going to look at the data and decide from there what you were going to do. I haven't heard anything about that. That's why I didn't put it in. Not that I had forgotten about it, but that we haven't seen anything yet to know the data, to know which way and how much you want to spend.
I have another question for Muriel. Muriel, coming up on later in the agenda is the contract for the
Housing element, et cetera,
Hybrid
For
meeting
hybrid-
or,
well,
Was it-
there's a hybrid meeting, which is $38,000.
Uh-huh.
and then
After that,
Raftelli's-
there's also the,
Raftelli's for
Yeah,
grant
Raftelli.
writing and
and
218 prep.
that's $69,000 approximately. We have a current balance apparently of $28,000 to $29,000 in the drainage fund balance. So that 69,000 that's being proposed at Agenda 11, would that be coming out of the general fund, or are we taking 28 to 29,000 out of the drainage fund and then the other 40,000 out of the general fund, or how would that be funded?
The 40,000 is already in the general fund budget. In the drainage fund, I believe I was looking at the economic enhancement fund to try to meet that shortfall until we actually get that Proposition 218 approved, and to also see basically for those 3 grants that we're applying for, to find out where that winds up, because that's going to be a big factor in determining what the drainage rate would be for the citizens of Mount Shasta. Yeah. If we have stuff paid by grants, of course, that lessens the amount that they have to pay in their monthly fee.
So are we likely to have those figures before the November ballot time? I'm thinking that if we tell the citizens they are now having to pay X dollars more for the drainage fund expense, and then that may affect how they vote in November.
That's a very good point, Councilmember Stearns.
And we'll know whether we've got those grants by that time. What I don't know is when we have to have a fixed number to the elections clerk to say this is what we're going for on the ballot in terms of drainage impact fees by property.
Any other comments?
How do the other council members feel about deferring the $75,000 transfer to the equipment replacement fund for purpose of the budget at this point in time?
To remove that for the final reading next meeting?
Pardon?
To remove it for our final next meeting? That's fine with me.
Right. Other council members?
I just want to wait until September. This budget is the preliminary, it's kind of, we can pass it and find out in September that our beginning fund balance was better than we thought. Yeah, I thought. I'm kind of in line with what John was saying. We need to really focus on revenue and whatever that takes, such as a Josh Thomas effort. If he's no good, then we should be looking at something else. Yeah. Now, we need to promote this town directly versus the Siskiyou, Discover Siskiyou, which is a general program for the county, which is good, but the thing we're trying to do with Josh Thomas is to promote Mount Shasta explicitly, the actual city. And I think that effort should be continued. And I'm fairly bullish, even though the macroeconomic forecasts are really kind of dire, frankly. But I think we have a special situation here in Mount Shasta where people in Shasta County are doing apparently fairly well, and they like visiting here, partially because of the heat and partially because of possibly good snow and winter's events. And we also have people coming from afar who are trying us out, apparently because Tahoe either is unapproachable due to weather or it's just unapproachable due to cost. This is apparently really expensive to ski there and to visit there anymore. So they're trying us out, a little bit longer drive. But the big talk in this town has always been that we need to be a tourist town. We're not going to be an industrial town. We're not going to be a light industrial town. We're going to be a tourist town. Well, that's happening. And it's leading to these revenue increases. So let's see where this ends up on June 30th. And then we can make a whole slew of budget adjustments. We can make a whole bunch of feelings in October. And that's the way it goes. At least we can say we were patient and tried to keep things nice and bullish and hope that all these numbers were going to be turning favorable. And if they don't, then we'll have to get really, really draconian if that's true.
Well, I've got a proactive proposal just for consideration. Down in Dunsmuir, we used, there's a certain, I forget the terminology, maybe Mira, you could help me out, through CDBG, if you have a certain amount of surplus revenue coming back in for, say, CDBG home repair loans or, or for business loans. I forget the term. What we did is we had to have a 5% match for an EDA grant for $250,000 for a retail strategy, bringing a firm in to look at where our deficits are in terms of need, which we already have some of that information from Cosmont, and hire an economic development firm for a couple of years with those funds to actually a company that has connections across business and try to bring in the types of businesses that can do well here based on our economic forecast. I applied for that in Dunsmuir 2 years ago, and Dunsmuir was just awarded it about 6 months ago. So we've got a template for it. We had the EDC write it for us, and it may be something that at least it puts another ire in the fire potentially.
I don't want to be gloom and doom, but we had a great snow season this year, the best in years. My understanding of even though I bought a season pass for next year, my understanding is the snow conditions are not supposed to be nearly as good. So I don't know that we can rely upon the increase in revenues we got from the good snow season this year going into the next year.
The fact of the matter is that the winter months, the January, February, March, and the October, November, December TOT amounts were down this year. Not relative to the prior year, which was not a good snow year. So I can't bank on saying, at least for TOT, that a good or bad snow year is an indication of how we're going to receive TOT. Those have always been our off months. The months that are our superstars are the months that we're in now: April, May, June, July, August, September. Way more than what we get in the winter. That's just a fact.
And of course, the TOT also varies depending upon whether we have fires or not.
Absolutely, but even when we had fires, which are in those summer months, our TOT has stayed strong. Still, the winter months are not our strong months for TOT. It just isn't.
I think we've beaten this dead horse long enough. So we will reconvene this subject at the next council meeting and go from there. I'm going to call a 10-minute recess, coming back at 7:35. To order, we are on agenda item number 10, approval of hybrid meeting services contract by Todd.
Bear with me for a second while I pull this up. Okay, so as you know, we made a decision to go out with an RFP to see if there was another firm out there that could provide hybrid meeting services at the same level of expertise as 22nd Avenue. And so we had an RFP put out. We had a local citizen that said that they could do this work. There wasn't a response from this person. There were no other responses, just 22nd Avenue, and they're basically coming in at approximately the same rate as their first year. They've been going month to month. They, in the new proposal, applied a 4% escalator. They went from, providing 3 meetings a month at $3,075, dollars. That's including 2 council meetings, 1 planning commission meeting, which we actually didn't use because of our lack of planner, to $3,195 a month. And so the difference at the end of the year is if we decide to renew this contract, it goes from $36,900 to $38,340. And, if we need additional meetings, which that's very doubtful, each additional meeting would be at a discounted rate of $950.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay, we will open up for public comment. Anyone wish to speak? Welcome, Johanna.
Good evening. Just for the record, I just want to say I think hybrid meetings are super and a wonderful way to engage the community because, as I've mentioned in prior meetings, people cannot always attend. They have physical ailments. They are cooking dinner. They're picking up kids from, events and school, after school programs or whatever. And so I think it's just a really important thing. So I just hope you do include this in some form. I'm not necessarily, $40,000 is a lot of money, but if the other methods do not work, like the Cisco meetings or the Zoom meetings, and this is our best option, then I think that's well worth it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone online?
No.
All right, we will close public comment, bring it back for council discussion. Or motion.
Well, let me ask a question. Is there provision, I didn't see a provision, but can we put in a provision in the proposed contract for an escape clause in the case we find financial need?
There is a termination clause. I would have to look at the contract in terms of how much notice we'd need to give. I believe the contract length is a year and a half, but there is an out for both parties. And I don't have the full contract here. Wait a minute, thank you. It's the whole contract's 12 months, 45 days written notice termination by either party. Written notice.
No penalty?
What's that?
No penalty? There's no liquidated damage charge?
Wait. The city will pay the vendor $75 for each meeting remaining in the contract.
Do all the comments? All right, so I'm going to move to approve the hybrid meeting contract with 22nd Avenue Entertainment for 12-month period starting immediately,
Starting July 1st.
starting July 1st at the rates mentioned by the city manager.
If I understand the motion is to approve the proposed contract.
Proposed contract as just outlined by the city manager with 22nd Avenue.
And as set forth in the agenda packet.
Correct.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Opposed.
Sorry.
4-1.
All right. Agenda item number 11. Raftelis?
Raftelis is the company that has been doing our drainage impact fee and has gotten us to this point where they've digitized high-resolution photography to understand the amount of impervious surface for every property in the city, and that's how the the impact fee will be assessed. It will need to go to the ballot as as an impact fee. So a couple of these things, because of time constraints, we got to jump on this. So this is a combination of grant support. They, with money we had in the original contract, they helped us get in a federal grant request. And for this, they have been working on 3 drainage impact three drainage projects, and it's paying them for the work on getting those in. State revolving fund, and another for that they're working on for a federal grant for a community and corridor-based alternative vehicle charging. The other thing that is included in this proposal with a total of $69,095 is to put together the full drainage fee impact report and to do Prop 218 prep, everything from getting out the word and the public meetings and everything to make sure that we get to a yes.
Thank you. Assuming that these grants are awarded, would those monies reimburse the fees per grant that we used?
I don't know,
Okay.
but I can find out.
Any other questions?
Yes, I noticed that there was a 30-hour for miscellaneous at $350 an hour. And would we be, if we adopt this or approve this proposed contract, if, I can't remember her name, Hillary or?
Henrietta.
Henrietta does not engage in 30 hours of miscellaneous, are we obligated to pay that or no? That's just a budgeted amount.
It is in there to protect for cost overruns. I mean, I don't think that we're going to need actually the full amount, and at least that's my discussion with her, and she's been incredibly professional and on top of everything.
Okay.
So,
To the chair. City Manager, can you help lay out the source of funds for this agenda item? Like what part's coming from the general fund, what's coming out of the drainage
impact fees?
Yeah, Muriel had mentioned that. There was the Economic Development Fund for, I'm sorry, Muriel, help me out on this. It's $40,000 coming from the general fund, and the rest is coming from the Economic Enhancement Fund.
Okay. When the 218 process, assuming it goes through,
Yeah.
and there's some assessment of fees that go into the Drainage Impact Fund, do any of those impact fund fees flow back into the general fund to like reimburse it, or that's just the way it worked? That doesn't happen?
Yeah, it's a sunk cost in exchange for the, the strong likelihood that we'll get at least one of these grants.
Okay.
And, as Muriel mentioned before, if we're successful with one of the 3 state revolving fund grants for drainage, that helps bring down the cost that is assessed to each property. And so that makes it more saleable than if we win all 3.
Thank you.
For clarification on that, I know in the past we have done inter-fund loans. Is that what we're talking about here?
We could be,
Basically a loan from the general fund to the drainage fund?
if council so desires.
I mean, that would be, I think, appropriate, so that if the money does come in, then the general fund would be reimbursed.
Any other questions? All right, we'll open up for public comment. Anyone in the audience wish to speak? Anyone online?
No one online.
All right, we will close public comment, bring it back for council discussion. Yes.
So just to clarify that, I'm thinking Muriel is the one that asked on this. So 69, it's almost $70,000. $69.9 thousand is the proposed amendment dollar amount. And as we've been discussing, it sounds to me like the drainage fund has approximately $28,000 or $29,000 that could cover part of this, or no? Or is it, we're simply just going to have to take that dollar amount from the general fund? I mean, yeah, the general fund.
I think it's a good idea to actually do the interfund loan. We've done it in the past for things like a parking lot, for instance,
So
for the.
would be for $70,000 from general fund to drainage, and then hopefully repayment upon reception of grants and so forth.
Or
the fees.
Yeah, yes, indeed. I believe part of the $69,000 is already in the general fund for the pieces that are not drainage related, and there's 44,000, I believe, is what I have down for the cost in the drainage fund. So in your budget packet, page, I'm not sure what page it's on, but in any event, you would take a look at the Drainage Operations Fund and the Drainage Improvement Fund and see that the actuals to date, the Improvement Fund has $29,000. The Operation Fund right now has a negative $33,000. So we're going to be in a deficit going into the year, in which case I would book whatever that deficit is as a loan from the general fund to, or the enhancement fund, which we have some money there too. So it'll be one of the two. And moving forward into 23, 24, I would do a similar type thing.
Based upon that explanation, I would be supportive of this agenda item and encourage Councilmember Stackcliffe to make a motion.
All right. further discussion, so within the motion, should I mention the inter-fund loan?
Yeah.
Yes.
Program we talked about?
Yes.
So I'm gonna, it's gonna be a little bit of a long motion, so I'm gonna move to approve the amendment for Raftyless Professional Services, task 4A in the sum of $10,650, task 5 in the sum of $10,500, task 6, two parts, $60,775, and then for an application, I guess, $14,750 for a total of $69,895 to be financed, covered by inter-fund loans as appropriate and managed by Finance Director and City Manager.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, there were no outside meetings. 13, future agenda items and meetings appearing on the agenda within 60 to 90 days. A, resolution calling for consolidation of the elections, 62623. B, renewal of facilities agreement with the Recreation and Parks District, 62623. C, resolution requesting a local measure be placed on the ballot, 7/2023. D, vacation of Field Street to be determined. E, discussion and possible action, McLeod Avenue parking prohibition to be determined. F, city newsletter to be determined. And future agenda items over 90 days is discussion and possible action, review of Chapter 13.95, extraction exportation of groundwater from the city of Mount Shasta. Anything to add?
Yes, I would ask that we add one more item to future agendas, and that would be discussion and possible action as to the Active Transportation Committee. Example, keep and activate it, eliminate it, update its duties.
I'll second that.
And then I would also like to add on for acquiring a finance committee, if that's separate from an audit committee. I'm not sure if those are two separate items. And then setting up monthly financial review once that committee is formed.
I support that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that has to actually even go on a future agenda. Well, maybe it does have to go on a future agenda item, but
I think so.
yes.
Yeah.
The city newsletter is under a TBD mode, and it just occurs to me that we're going to try and pass or encourage our citizenry to pass a TOT 2% increase, and yet we have no effective way to reach them. It may be, should the rest of the council decide, that it might be a good vehicle to use to reach our populace and encourage them to vote for a TOT increase, which I'm sensing, given our budget realities or apparent realities, that we're going to need to encourage them as all we can, unfortunately.
Legally, we can't lobby for a ballot proposition, but we can provide information relevant to the ballot proposition. And I hear you saying that acting on the city newsletter would provide the opportunity for the city to provide relevant information to the regarding the ballot proposition. So,
And so we're clear, I'm talking about electronic newsletter. I'm not talking about hard copy.
yeah, no, electronic copy. There's one more thing that I'd like to get clarification on. The contract between the library contractor, who are the parties, the signatories to that contract?
The last contract, strangely, has the contractor, the city attorney, city clerk, city manager.
Okay. And I don't know that that ever came before council,
I don't.
whether it was a approval of council with authorization.
I would
of the city manager
assume
to sign.
so, but that was under,
I remember we put an extension of
yeah.
Well, if that's the case, then it sounds like action regarding the library contract, whether it's for RFP or renewal or anything else, should be put on the city council agenda.
Yeah, I'm now tasked with writing an RFP for library services.
Okay, so I'd
And I'll
ask that be put on a
Be
future
bringing
agenda.
that.
I'll second that. And are we getting the newsletter bumped up to have a date? I didn't hear that part.
Say that one more time?
The newsletter, are we going to assign the date for that? Is that what you were asking?
Well, for the newspaper?
For the newsletter, yeah. Is that what you were?
Up to the city
Okay.
manager. He's in charge of staff priorities and knows where things are more than I do.
Okay.
It just.
Just making sure that we had a,
Yeah, just, because it may not work. It's just one of
Sure.
those if staff, because
if the timing works.
if the timing works.
Okay. Anything else?
That's quite a lot.
All right, we are adjourned.